"This is it," Liam said, his voice filled with awe and dread. "This is the place. The heart of the power." Jason clenched his fists. "We fight here, and we fight to win. Everyone follow my lead. We're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for the future." The battle began with a blast, the air around them crackling with energy as the power surged to life. The enemy, a mass of swirling, dark energy, took shape before them. It was unlike anything Jason had ever seen, an immense form, ever shifting, its face a blur of shadows and light. It was both everywhere and nowhere, a being that transcended space and time. The Varol's ships surged forward first, their energy weapons lighting up the space with brilliant beams of light. But it was clear that they weren't enough. The entity absorbed their blasts, bending the very fabric of reality to shield itself. Jason's heart raced. "Focus fire on its core. We can't let it regenerate." His orders rang out through the comms, and the human ships followed suit, launching wave after wave of missiles and energy blasts at the entity's shifting form. The energy beams collided with its core, causing it to ripple in a terrifying burst of light. But even as the blasts hit, it was only momentarily stunned. It began to reform almost immediately. Jason gritted his teeth. "It's not enough. We need to hit it at its source." Nara, who had been silent until now, spoke through the ship's comm. "The source is within the entity itself, but to reach it, you must be willing to sacrifice everything. The power you are facing is connected to the fabric of reality. If you strike at it directly, you will risk tearing the universe apart." Jason didn't hesitate. "Then let's tear it apart." He took the helm himself, guiding the ship into the heart of the battle. With his hand steady on the controls, Jason led his ship toward the center of the energy storm, the Varol ships following close behind. Their weapons lit up in a final, desperate attempt to breach the enemy's defenses. Jason felt the air in the cockpit grow heavier, as if the very universe was holding its breath. And then, with a final burst of energy, his ship's weapon systems locked onto the core of the entity. "Now," Jason shouted, "all forces, fire everything you've got." The combined power of the fleet poured into the entity, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The very fabric of space and time shuddered as the energy exploded outward, creating a massive shockwave that rippled through the battlefield. The stars themselves seemed to flicker and fade, and for a brief second, Jason thought he saw the universe itself unravel. But then, the energy dissipated. The entity was gone. Jason stood, staring at the empty space where the dark mass had once been. The battle was over. The power had been sealed away. The universe, for now, was safe. But Jason knew this victory was not without its cost. They had averted disaster. But the war had changed them all. It had revealed something deeper, something darker than they could have imagined. And the real question remained, would humanity be able to rebuild, or would the scars of this battle haunt them forever? The Varol, the ancient enemies of the Zorvax, had been their last hope for an alliance to fight the awakening power that threatened the galaxy. But the Varol had proven to be as secretive and inscrutable as ever. They had made it clear that they were not here to help out of the goodness of their hearts. Their allegiance was tied to a much deeper, darker purpose. As Jason stood at the helm, Liam approached him, a grim expression on his face. "Commander," Liam began, his voice low, "the Varol are ready, but they have a condition." Jason turned slowly, raising an eyebrow. "A condition? What now?" "They won't fight this war on our behalf unless we do something for them first. Something drastic." Jason ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of exhaustion creeping into his bones. "What do they want?" Liam hesitated. "They want us to give up control of the ship and its resources. They want us to hand over everything, the crew, the technology, our command. They say it's necessary to gain access to the power we're up against." Jason clenched his jaw. "We fought for this ship, for this crew, for our survival. We're not handing over control to anyone, especially not to them. I know, sir, Liam said, his voice filled with understanding. But they're the only ones who can truly defeat the power we're facing. They've been preparing for this moment for centuries. We have no other choice. It's either ally with them or lose everything. Jason's mind was racing, his thoughts conflicting. The idea of handing over everything he had fought for felt like a betrayal of everything his crew had stood for. But deep down, he knew the truth. They didn't have the power to defeat whatever was coming on their own. He glanced at the view screen again, the stars twinkling in the distance like distant beacons. The universe was vast, and yet here he was, caught in the middle of a war he hadn't even known existed until recently. He had to make a decision that could change the fate of humanity and the galaxy itself. All right, Jason said, his voice firm. We'll meet their terms, but I want to be clear, we're doing this on our own terms. The crew stays loyal to me. We may ally with the Varel, but we won't become their pawns. Liam nodded, a mix of relief and uncertainty in his eyes. Understood, Commander. The alliance formed. Later that day, Jason stood on the deck of his ship, surrounded by Varel representatives. The aliens were as strange as they were intimidating. Tall, their skin shimmering with a translucent glow, their eyes dark and unwavering. They didn't speak much, their communication more through telepathy than words, but their presence was undeniable. They were ancient, their power palpable in the air around them. The leader of the Varel, a figure called Erix, stepped forward, his imposing figure casting a shadow across the ship's deck. His voice was deep, resonating not just in the air, but in Jason's mind. You understand the gravity of the situation, human, Erix said, his voice echoing in Jason's mind. The power that is awakening is not just a force, it is a being. An ancient entity, born of the very fabric of reality itself. And if it is not stopped, it will unmake the universe, bending time and space to its will. Jason felt a cold shiver run down his spine. And you're the ones who can stop it. Erix nodded. We are the guardians of this power, but even we cannot do it alone. We need your strength, your resolve. Together, we can seal it away before it consumes us all. Jason nodded slowly. Then let's do it. Let's end this once and for all. The final battle. The fleet assembled, a vast armada of ships, human and Varel alike, ready to face the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever known. The stars above were dotted with flashes of light as their ships prepared to jump into the heart of the unknown, to where the power was building, its source, its epicenter, somewhere beyond the reach of normal space. The battle would take place in a place beyond time itself, a space where reality began to warp. The enemy they were about to face was no longer just an army. It was a force, a living, breathing entity of unimaginable power. Nera had warned them. The Varel had warned them. But nothing could truly prepare them for what they were about to face. As the ships dropped out of hyperspace, Jason felt his breath catch. The battlefield stretched before them, not a typical space fight, but a realm of swirling energy, shifting like liquid metal. It was as if the very stars were warping, bending, and distorting. Silence followed. Then, slowly, one by one, the responses came in. Standing with you, Commander. We won't let them take the ship, sir. You have my blade. Hope flickered in Jason's chest. He still had allies. Liam, Jason said, gripping his weapon. Let's take back my damned ship. The battle for the ship. The corridors were filled with gunfire. Jason led his forces through the lower decks, sweeping from one section to the next, reclaiming control. It was brutal, close-quarters combat. The mutineers fought with desperation, but Jason's forces fought with purpose. Jason cut through two traitors with precision, his mind locked onto his goal, reaching the control room. Marlowe was waiting for him. The doors slid open, and Jason stepped inside, his weapon raised. Marlowe stood at the center, gun pointed at him. You should have just stepped down, Marlowe said. Now I have to kill you. Jason stared at him, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. I trusted you, Marlowe. And I trusted you, Marlowe shot back, until you became a traitor. Jason didn't wait. He lunged forward. The fight was brutal. Marlowe was fast, but Jason was faster. The two warriors clashed, their blades flashing as they fought for control of the ship. Marlowe managed to land a cut across Jason's arm, but Jason retaliated with a vicious counterstrike, sending Marlowe stumbling back. Marlowe raised his weapon to fire, but before he could pull the trigger, a blast of energy sent him flying across the room. Jason turned. Nira stood in the doorway, her hands crackling with energy. Not bad, human, she said with a smirk, but I thought you could use some help. Jason didn't argue. He grabbed his weapon and pointed it at Marlowe. It's over. Marlowe coughed, blood staining his lips. He looked up at Jason, his face filled with bitterness. You're making a mistake. Jason shook his head. No, I'm making a choice. And with that, he fired. A new enemy emerges. With Marlowe dead and the ship back under control, Jason turned to Nira. You saved me, he said, his voice steady but laced with suspicion. Why? Nira crossed her arms. Because you're not ready to die yet. You're still useful to me. Jason scoffed. And what do you need me for now? Nira's face darkened. Because the real war hasn't even started yet. Jason felt a cold dread settle in his chest. Explain. Nira's eyes gleamed. Your betrayal was nothing compared to what's coming next. There is another force, one even more dangerous than the Zorvax or your own people. Jason tensed. Who? Nira stepped closer, lowering her voice. The ones who created the power. The ones who have been watching. And now that the balance has been broken, they are coming. Jason exhaled sharply. The battle for his ship had been only a preview of what was to come. Because now, the real enemy had awoken. The final stand. Jason stood on the bridge of his warship, his gaze fixed on the stars outside, though his mind was far from the peaceful expanse of space. The events of the past few days had unfolded too quickly, too chaotically. The rebellion had been dealt with, but the war was no longer just about defeating the Zorvax or any other enemy he had expected. The stakes had shifted, and now, with Nira's cryptic words hanging over him, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something far more dangerous. A new enemy was coming, one that Jason couldn't yet understand, but he knew it was not just another alien race. This enemy was far older, far more powerful, and their motives were something Jason hadn't even begun to comprehend. The fate of the galaxy now lay in the hands of those who were once enemies, and the unknown alliances that were about to form. Jason knew that time was running out, and the true test was just beginning. As the officers filed out of the room, Jason lingered for a moment, staring at the empty map on the wall. The path ahead was unclear, and the risks were greater than ever, but one thing was certain. The battle for the galaxy had entered a new phase, and he was about to make a choice that could determine whether humanity would rise or fall forever. Betrayal and rebellion. The cold void of space stretched endlessly before them, the darkness occasionally broken by the faint glow of distant stars. Jason stood at the bridge of his warship, staring out into the abyss, his mind heavy with the weight of his decision. The past week had been filled with negotiations, tension, and whispered doubts. The idea of forging an alliance with the Varel, ancient enemies of the Zorvax, was met with resistance from his own people. Many of his officers believed it was a suicide mission. Others called him a fool. But Jason knew the truth. They had no choice. The ancient force Nira had spoken of was real. It was stirring, awakening, and if left unchecked, it would consume everything. Jason had expected resistance from his men, but he had not anticipated betrayal. As his fleet prepared to rendezvous with the Varel, a sudden explosion rocked the ship. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the control panels. "Commander," one of his officers shouted, "we've been sabotaged. The engine room has taken heavy damage." Jason's gut tightened. What? By who? Before the officer could respond, the ship's security alert sounded again. Internal sensors had detected movement in the lower levels, unauthorized personnel armed and advancing towards the bridge. Jason's mind raced. This wasn't just sabotage. This was a coup. "Lock down the ship," Jason ordered. "Activate emergency defense protocols. No one gets to the bridge without my authorization." The ship's automated defenses roared to life, but Jason knew it wouldn't be enough. Whoever had orchestrated this attack had planned it well. Jason turned to Liam, his most trusted officer. "Who do you think is behind this?" Liam's face was grim. "There's been talk, Jason, ever since you decided to negotiate with the Varol. Some of the crew, especially the old war veterans, think you've lost your mind. They see the Varol as no different from the Zorvex. They don't trust them, and they sure as hell don't trust you anymore." Jason clenched his fists. "So they'd rather risk our extinction than try to survive." Liam shook his head. "Some of them don't believe in this ancient power stuff, Jason. They think you've been manipulated by Nira." Jason's eyes darkened. He had expected doubt, but outright betrayal. That was something else entirely. A sudden voice crackled over the ship's intercom. "Jason," the voice sneered, "it's over. Step down, surrender the ship, and we won't have to kill you." Jason recognized the voice instantly. Captain Marlowe, one of his best officers, someone he had fought alongside for years. Jason exhaled slowly, his hands tightening around the console. Marlowe continued, "You were a great commander once, Jason, but you've lost your way. You expect us to make peace with our enemies. You expect us to believe in some fairy tale power. You're gambling with humanity's survival." Jason grabbed the communicator. "Marlowe, listen to me. You don't understand what's at stake here. The war we've been fighting was never what we thought it was. The Zorvax were. I don't care what the Zorvax were." Marlowe snapped. "All I know is that we won. And now, instead of pressing our advantage, you want to crawl to their enemies and beg for help. It's pathetic, Jason. You're pathetic." Jason took a deep breath. "You think you're doing the right thing, but you don't have all the information, Marlowe. You're making a mistake." "No," Marlowe replied coldly. "The mistake was trusting you to lead us." The transmission cut out. Jason turned to Liam. "How many men are still loyal?" Liam hesitated. "Maybe half." Jason gritted his teeth. That was enough. Barely. He tapped into the ship-wide intercom. "To all crew members, you know me. You fought alongside me. I have never led you into a battle I did not believe in. If you stand with me now, I swear to you, I will not let humanity fall. But if you raise your weapons against me, you will be treated as traitors." "The war isn't what we thought it was," Jason said, his voice steady but edged with the seriousness of his words. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We've uncovered something much bigger." The room fell silent, the officers exchanging wary glances. Jason's words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. "Jason, what are you talking about?" asked Commander Liam, his brow furrowed. Jason looked directly at them. "We've been played, and I've just begun to understand how deep the deception goes. The Zorvax weren't just invaders. They were guardians of an ancient, powerful force that could reshape reality itself. And now, it's free, and it's looking for a host." The room was still for a moment. The words "reshape reality" echoed in everyone's mind. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, their faces reflecting a mixture of disbelief and dread. "Are you telling us that this is what the Zorvax were guarding?" One of the officers, Captain Marlowe, asked. "That this power is something they were keeping hidden?" Jason nodded grimly. "Yes, and now that they're defeated, that power is no longer under their control. It has no master, and if it falls into the wrong hands, it could bring about the destruction of everything we know." But we've barely beaten them once, Captain Marlowe replied. How do we even fight against something like that? Jason paused, weighing his next words carefully. I don't know how to fight it, but I do know we can't do it alone. The silence in the room grew heavier, and the officers exchanged looks of uncertainty. It was clear that the enemy they had once faced, one of technology, strategy, and brute force, was now overshadowed by something far more complex, something they couldn't understand or predict. Commander Liam was the first to speak again. What exactly do you propose, Jason? We can't take on this force by ourselves. It's not just a war anymore. It's something else. Jason looked at each of his officers, feeling the pressure of their expectations weighing on him. He wasn't just their commander. He was their last hope. And now, more than ever, he had to make the decision that could alter everything. We need allies, Jason said, his voice firm, the weight of the decision clear in his eyes. We need to find a way to work with the very people we've been fighting against. The officers exchanged looks of disbelief. Are you suggesting we make an alliance with the Zorvex? Liam asked, his voice tinged with shock. After everything they've done. No, Jason responded immediately. Not the Zorvex, but their enemies, the ones who they've been at war with for centuries, the ones who know the true nature of this power, the ones who understand what it really means. Who are these enemies? Captain Marlowe asked, his brow furrowed. They call themselves the Varol, Jason said, the name foreign to everyone in the room. They are an ancient race, older than the Zorvex and far more powerful. They have been locked in an eternal struggle to keep this power from falling into the wrong hands. They know the risks. And now, they are our only chance. The officers sat back, their minds racing with the implications of Jason's words. An alliance with the Varol. The very idea seemed impossible. The Varol were a race of warriors, known for their ruthless nature, and they had fought the Zorvax in countless wars. The idea of asking for their help seemed like a long shot at best. But Jason wasn't finished. We can't win this fight on our own. The power we're facing is beyond anything we've encountered. The Zorvax knew this, which is why they fought to keep it hidden. And now we must do the same. But we can't do it alone. The Varol are our only option. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, Commander Liam finally broke the silence. If you think the Varol can be trusted, Jason, we'll follow your lead, he said. But this isn't going to be easy. Not by a long shot. Jason nodded, the weight of his decision pressing on him more heavily than ever. He knew the risks. But there was no other way. Humanity was on the brink of destruction, and if they didn't act now, they would lose everything. We move at dawn, Jason said, standing from the table. Prepare the ship. We need to make contact with the Varol, and pray they're willing to listen. The officers stood as well, the room filled with a sense of determination and uncertainty. Jason had made his decision. Now he had to find a way to convince the Varol to join them, if they even had a chance of succeeding. Nira's gaze was intense, almost hypnotic. A power that has the potential to wipe out entire civilizations. A force that can control the elements, reshape minds, and bend the very fabric of reality. My people were tasked with protecting it, keeping it hidden from the rest of the universe. Jason's mind was spinning. You're telling me that this power is hidden somewhere, and the Zorvax were guarding it. Nira nodded. Yes, and now that you've defeated the Zorvax army, their greatest weapon is no longer protected. The power is free. Jason's blood ran cold. What does that mean for us? For the entire galaxy? It means the war has only just begun, Nira said, her voice steady, but her eyes betrayed a hint of fear. It means that the forces you're up against are not just soldiers, but something far more ancient, something that cannot be defeated with mere weapons or strategies. You will have to decide whether you will fight for your world's survival, or if you will be consumed by the power you've unleashed. Jason felt the weight of her words press down on him. The Zorvax, who he had once seen as the enemy, were now revealed to be protectors, the very beings who had kept this power in check. The question now was whether this ancient force would fall into the wrong hands, or if humanity could rise to the challenge. What's worse, Nira continued, is that the power you've unleashed isn't just an ancient force. It's also a living entity, and it is looking for a vessel, a host. Jason felt the blood drain from his face. A host? A living being? What does that have to do with me? You, Nira said, her eyes locking onto his with a startling intensity, are the key. The room seemed to grow colder as Jason processed her words. For a moment, he didn't know if he was hearing things clearly, if his mind was playing tricks on him. But the truth was undeniable. Nira had just revealed something far more dangerous than a war. She had revealed the existence of a force that could not only destroy everything Jason had fought for, but everything humanity had ever known. "Why me?" he whispered, unable to fully comprehend the magnitude of her statement. Nira took a deep breath, her expression somber. "Because, Jason, you are the one who has been chosen. Whether you like it or not, you are now bound to this power, and it is only a matter of time before it finds you." Jason stood in stunned silence. His world suddenly turned upside down. Everything he had fought for, everything he had believed in, was now part of something far bigger and far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. And the worst part, there was no going back. The hidden alliance. Jason's mind spun as he walked away from the interrogation room, his thoughts a tangled mess. Nira's words echoed in his ears, a constant reminder that his understanding of the war, of the universe itself, was just the beginning. He had always believed in clear boundaries, enemies, allies, and the spaces in between. But now, the lines had blurred. The power she spoke of wasn't just a weapon to be wielded. It was something living, something that had chosen him, and for reasons unknown to him, he was its key. As days passed, Jason's determination grew. If Nira was right, and the power she spoke of was real, humanity's future was at stake. Not just his planet's survival, but the entire galaxy's fate hung in the balance. He needed to know more. He needed to act, but the questions were overwhelming. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him. And so, Jason called together his most trusted officers. The walls of the war room were lined with maps, battle plans, and projections of Zorvak movements. The air was thick with the tension of what lay ahead, but Jason's mind was still occupied with Nira's cryptic warnings. "Gather everyone," Jason ordered, his voice firm but weighed down by the gravity of the situation. "We need to rethink our strategy." The officers filed in, their faces grim, reflecting the unease that had been building ever since the last battle. They had fought hard, and although victory had been claimed, they knew the Zorvaks were not easily defeated. They would return, stronger and more dangerous than before. As Jason sat at the head of the table, he looked around the room. His officers, his people, he trusted them with his life. But even their loyalty felt uncertain in the face of the new revelations. No one could have anticipated what they were up against. One of his officers, Commander Liam, spoke up, his voice steady but skeptical. "You've been quiet, Jason. What's going on? You look like you're carrying the weight of the galaxy on your shoulders." Jason sighed deeply, his fingers drumming on the table. He couldn't keep this from them any longer. He had to trust them. They were his last hope. Secrets unveiled. Jason couldn't sleep. The weight of Nira's words hung over him like a storm cloud. The more he thought about her claims, the more he realized how little he understood about the forces at play in this war. Nira wasn't just any alien. She was the key to something much bigger. But what exactly that was, he couldn't yet grasp. The next morning, as dawn broke over the horizon, Jason stood alone on the balcony of his quarters, staring out at the battlefield that had once been filled with the sounds of chaos and destruction. Now it was quiet, the calm before the storm. Jason had sent for Nira again. He needed answers. She had to know something about the Zorvak force's next move, or at least he hoped she did. But more than that, he needed to understand the depth of her power and why it was so important to the war. When the guards brought Nira into the room, she walked with a quiet confidence, her head held high. Her eyes locked onto Jason's, as if she had already read him, seen through his thoughts. There was no fear in her gaze, only the same unwavering defiance. But today, Jason noticed something different, a shadow of something in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or perhaps something else entirely. "Sit down," Jason ordered, his voice calm yet firm. This time, he wasn't going to ask her questions. He was going to demand answers. Nira didn't respond right away. Instead, she walked to the center of the room and turned to face him. "You think you're the first human to try and question me." Her voice was sharp, but there was an edge to it now, a weariness that hadn't been there before. "You think you'll get what you want by forcing me to talk." Jason held her gaze, his jaw clenched. "I'm not here to force you into anything, Nira. I'm here because I need answers, and I'm not leaving until I get them." Nira's expression softened for a brief moment, but then it was gone, replaced by that cold, calculating look. "You're not ready to hear the truth," she said quietly. "But you're right about one thing. You will get answers, just not in the way you expect." Jason's heart raced. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, his voice tinged with curiosity and concern. For the first time, Nira's lips curved into a small smile, but it was not a comforting one. It was the smile of someone who knew far more than she was letting on, someone who was playing a game far more dangerous than Jason had realized. "I've been waiting for you to understand," Nira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you still don't get it, do you? You think you're in control. You think you're the one making the decisions. But you're not." Jason's confusion deepened. "I don't understand. What do you mean?" Nira's eyes glinted with an unspoken secret. "You're caught in a trap, Jason. And the worst part is, you're the one who said it." Jason's mind reeled. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "I'm not the one who started this war. I'm just trying to protect my people." "And you're doing a good job of it," Nira said softly, her voice tinged with a strange sympathy. "But you're not the first to think that way. And you won't be the last." Jason's confusion turned to frustration. "I've had enough of your riddles. If you have something to say, then say it." Nira's gaze softened for a moment, and she sighed. "You think you captured me, but in truth, it was the other way around. I've been watching you for a long time, Jason, and I know more about you than you think." Jason took a step forward, his fists clenched. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Nira began, her voice growing more serious, "that your world, your entire planet, is part of something much bigger than you could ever imagine. You're not just fighting for survival. You're fighting for something far more dangerous. You've already crossed a line you cannot uncross, and now there's no going back." Jason's pulse quickened. "What do you mean? What have we done?" Nira's eyes darkened, and she took a step closer to him. "You've activated something. Something that has been dormant for millennia." The Zorvacs were not just conquerors. They were the guardians of an ancient power, a force so great that it could reshape the universe itself. Jason felt the floor beneath him shift, as though the ground was no longer solid. "What kind of power?" he asked, barely able to comprehend her words. Nira smiled faintly, though it was not a friendly smile. It was more like the smile of someone who had just won a battle. "You should not have captured me," she said softly, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "I have powers that you cannot understand, and I will not be controlled by anyone, not even you." Jason took a step back, his mind racing. He had suspected that Nira was more than she appeared, but seeing her demonstrate such raw power left him shaken. Could she be telling the truth? Was she more than just a soldier, a prisoner of war? "Explain," Jason said, his voice steady, but with a hint of urgency. "What kind of power do you have?" Nira stood up slowly, and Jason watched, still unsure of what to do next. She was unchained now, but she didn't seem threatening. In fact, she seemed almost calm. "I am not just any soldier," she began. "I am a guardian of the Zorvek Empire, a protector of their most sacred secrets. My people are not simply warriors. We are bound to forces that you cannot even comprehend. The power I hold is not something that can be measured by your technology or your weapons. It is ancient. It is elemental." Jason's curiosity burned stronger than ever, but so did his sense of caution. This wasn't just about winning a war anymore. There was something much bigger at play. He needed to understand her powers, and he needed to know how to control or even harness them. "You're saying you can control more than just physical strength?" Jason asked, now fully engaged. "You're saying your people can manipulate forces beyond our understanding?" Nira nodded. "Yes, we have the ability to influence the natural world, to move things with our minds, to bend the elements to our will, to read the thoughts of others, and even alter them. This power is not just a tool of war. It is a gift that has been passed down through generations of my people. And now, because of your actions, that power has been awakened in me." Jason could hardly believe what he was hearing. He had fought against aliens with incredible technology, but the idea of psychic abilities, of elemental manipulation, it was beyond anything he had ever encountered. "Why didn't you use your power to escape earlier?" Jason asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. "Why didn't you break free when you had the chance?" Nira's expression darkened. "Because I am not a mindless beast to be unleashed at will. I fight only when necessary, and I will not use my powers unless I deem it appropriate." Jason felt a knot form in his stomach. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated the power she held. And now she was more of a threat than ever. "If you could do all this, why did you submit to being captured in the first place?" Jason asked, confusion flickering in his mind. Nira paused, and for a moment, she almost seemed to soften. "Because I knew it would be the only way to infiltrate your world, to gain your trust. You think you captured me, but it is I who have captured you." Jason's eyes widened. "What do you mean by that?" Nira took a step closer, her voice low and deadly. "You are the key. You, with your unshakable resolve, your willingness to fight no matter the odds. You will be the one to either save your people or destroy them." Jason's heart skipped a beat. The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. She wasn't just a prisoner. She wasn't just an alien invader. She was something far more significant. And now she was manipulating the very course of his fate. "What are you asking of me?" Jason said, his voice almost a whisper. "I'm not asking," Nira said, her eyes narrowing with a cold intensity. "You're already involved, and whether you realize it or not, you will help me, or you will be destroyed along with everything you hold dear." Jason stood in silence for a long time, absorbing the enormity of what Nira had just revealed. She was not just a prisoner, but an agent of something much larger, something that transcended the war. The power she held was undeniable. And now, somehow, he was caught in her web. But as much as her power intrigued him, Jason knew one thing for certain. He could not let her control the outcome. This war was his fight, and he would not back down. The question was, how would he defeat an enemy that could control the very elements and bend the will of others? He had to find a way to turn the tables, or else the fate of everything he had fought for would be in Nira's hands. But what choice did he have? "You've underestimated me, Nira," Jason said, a fierce glint in his eyes. "I won't let you destroy everything I've worked for, and I won't let you control my future. This fight is just beginning." "I'm not afraid of you," Jason said quietly, almost to himself. Nira stood up abruptly, her voice now a low growl. "You should be." Her words were laced with an undeniable power. "You have no idea what my people are capable of. You're playing with fire, human, and one day you'll burn for it." Jason took a deep breath, trying to process her words. He had been trained to fight, to lead his men to victory, but this alien woman had a power that was unlike anything he had ever encountered. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the stakes in this war were higher than he could have ever imagined. The Zorvik Empire was not just a threat. They were a force that would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. And Nira, as much as she resisted, was the key to it all. Jason's thoughts were interrupted when one of his soldiers entered the room, looking uneasy. "Commander, we've received new orders. We need to move out. The Zorvik forces are regrouping, and they're coming for us. We need to prepare for another fight." Jason nodded, but his eyes never left Nira. She was the key. He could feel it in his gut. As much as she defied him, as much as she resisted, she was part of something much larger than the war itself. "Get ready," Jason said to his soldier. He turned back to Nira. "You're right about one thing. This isn't over. And you're going to help me win this war." Nira didn't respond. She merely watched him, her gaze as unyielding as ever. But Jason could feel it. There was something deeper in her eyes now, something that had shifted between them, something that might change the course of the entire war. And for the first time since the battle began, Jason felt uncertain. Not about the fight, but about the alien prisoner standing before him. Because in her resistance, in her challenge, he realized that this war had only just begun. And Nira's role in it was far from over. The power within. Jason had never believed in the power of the unknown until he met Nira. Before her, he had fought wars in the traditional way, with soldiers, strategy, and weapons. But now, as the Zorvik forces prepared for their next move, something was different. The tension in the air was palpable, heavier than it had been before. And every time Jason looked at Nira, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was more than just a prisoner. The first time Jason witnessed her power was completely by accident. He had ordered her to be taken out of her cell for a brief interrogation. His aim was to learn more about the Zorvik forces and their next move. But when she stepped into the interrogation room, there was an odd change in the atmosphere. It was subtle at first, a shift in the air pressure, almost imperceptible. But Jason could feel it. The room seemed colder, the shadows deeper. Nira was escorted in by 2 soldiers, her hands bound in chains, yet her gaze never wavered from Jason's. She looked at him with such intensity that it was as if she could see through him, into his very soul. Jason felt an uncomfortable stirring inside him, a feeling that was more instinct than logic. "Sit down," Jason ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. But the moment he spoke, Nira's eyes flashed with something that sent a chill down his spine. "I have nothing to say to you," Nira responded, her voice colder than ever. There was no fear, no hesitation in her voice, just an unshakable confidence that unnerved him. Jason was about to speak again, but then it happened. Nira's chains began to rattle on their own. The sound was faint at first, but then they grew louder, as though something powerful was tugging at the metal, pulling it in an unseen direction. Jason's soldiers who stood at the door to the interrogation room looked uneasy, their hands hovering near their weapons, but none of them dared to move closer. And then, with a soft hiss, Nira raised her hand, and the chains fell to the floor with a clatter, completely undone. It was as though the metal had been shredded by an invisible force. Her eyes never left Jason's, and in that moment, a strange silence filled the room. Jason stared at her, his mouth slightly agape. "How did you do that?" he asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. He had seen technology, weapons, and even alien technology that defied explanation. But this was different. There was no machinery, no visible source of power. The aliens' resistance, the days that followed the victory, were filled with tension. The war had not truly ended. While Jason and his men celebrated their triumph, there was an uneasy calm that settled over the camp. The Zorvaks were not a race to forgive or forget easily, and the battle might have been won, but the war was far from over. Nira, the stunning alien who had been taken prisoner, was locked away in a high-security cell. Jason ordered extra guards to watch over her, knowing her rank and strength meant she would be no ordinary prisoner. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her than what met the eye. Something that made him both cautious and fascinated. Days turned into a week, but Nira refused to be broken. Every time Jason visited her cell, she remained defiant, her posture straight, her eyes filled with a fire that seemed to challenge him. The warriors who stood guard could not speak highly enough of her resilience, how she never once showed weakness, even in captivity. It was as if she were waiting for something, or someone, to rescue her, and Jason couldn't help but wonder if that someone was him. Despite her captivity, Nira remained dangerous. The first time Jason stepped into the cell to speak with her, she glared at him like a trapped animal. Her eyes locked onto his, intense and unyielding, as if daring him to make a move. "You think you've won, human," she spat, her voice filled with both disdain and a cold, calculated venom. "Your victory is meaningless. You've only delayed the inevitable." Jason leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, watching her. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, trying to understand her cryptic words. Nira's lips curled into a slight, mocking smile. "You are nothing but a pawn in a much larger game. You think your people are the victors, but you have no idea what you've unleashed." Jason's brow furrowed. He'd heard the threats before, but there was something different about the way she spoke. Her words felt more like a warning than a boast. "What do you mean by unleashed?" Jason repeated, leaning forward now. "What are you trying to tell me?" Nira stood up, her movements graceful and powerful despite her captivity. She walked to the far corner of the cell and sat down on the ground, crossing her legs. Her eyes never left Jason as she spoke, her voice low and filled with an eerie calm. "You humans," she began, "think of yourselves as the superior race, but you don't know anything about us, about what we are capable of. You captured me, thinking you could control me, but you fail to understand what I represent. I am not just a soldier. I am a symbol." Jason's curiosity piqued, but he kept his composure. "A symbol of what?" "A symbol of the Zorvik Empire," Nira said, her tone shifting to something far more dangerous. "We do not surrender. We do not yield. We fight until the end. And our people are coming for me. They will not rest until they have reclaimed me and punished you for your insolence." Jason's mind raced. He had been told the Zorvaks were a warrior race, but he had no idea how deeply their sense of honor and pride ran. This alien woman, this prisoner, was not just a warrior. She was a symbol of something far bigger, something that might make her even more dangerous than he could have imagined. "Why not just tell me what you're really after?" Jason asked, stepping closer to the cell, his voice steady but tinged with a hint of frustration. "If I wanted to, I could have killed you by now. What's the point of this game?" Nara's eyes flashed with a cold fire. "You think I fear death? I have seen worse things than death. I know the fate of those who betray my people, and I will not be made weak by your threats." Jason was taken aback by her strength, her unwavering resolve. He had seen soldiers break, men who had given in to fear, but Nira was different. She was defiant to the end. For a moment, the two of them locked eyes. Jason could feel the tension in the air. There was no doubt that Nira was more than just a prisoner to him. She was a force, a challenge, something that made his heart race in a way that no other victory ever had. The unexpected victory. The war had raged for days. The human warriors were exhausted, but they refused to give up. They were fighting against a powerful alien race, the Zorvaks, who had invaded their home planet. The Zorvaks were ruthless, technologically advanced, and led by a fierce general who had nearly wiped out the human forces in the beginning. But today, the humans had a secret weapon: strategy. Among the warriors was a young man named Jason, a skilled fighter and a leader among his people. His crew had faced defeat after defeat, but Jason refused to accept that. He had spent countless hours studying the Zorvik forces, learning their tactics, and planning his move. Now, the time had come to strike. The battlefield was littered with the remains of the Zorvak's massive war machines, their alien technology no match for the humans' quick thinking and determination. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the desolate landscape, Jason led the final charge. His team moved swiftly, cutting through the Zorvak soldiers with precision. They didn't expect this. They didn't expect humans to fight back so cleverly. Jason's heart pounded in his chest as he pushed forward, sword in hand, leading the charge against the last group of Zorvak warriors. The battle was fierce, but Jason's crew was unstoppable. With one final strike, the Zorvaks fell, and Jason stood over the wreckage, breathing heavily but victorious. But it wasn't over yet. As the smoke cleared, Jason noticed something that made him pause. There, in the center of the battlefield, was an alien unlike any other. She stood tall and proud, her alien skin glowing in the fading sunlight. She was breathtaking, her features sharp and regal, her eyes filled with a mix of defiance and curiosity. Jason's soldiers hesitated. They had fought for days, and they had just claimed a victory. But now, standing before them, was something that none of them had expected. A prisoner, but not just any prisoner. This alien woman had an air of authority about her. She was no ordinary soldier. She was the leader of the Zorvak army's personal guard, a position of high status. Jason could tell that by the way she carried herself, by the way her armor fit her with precision. She was a warrior, too. Jason stepped forward. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady, despite the chaos of the battlefield still echoing in his ears. The woman didn't respond at first. She simply stared at him, her lips curving slightly in a mocking smile. "I am Nira," she finally spoke, her voice cold yet captivating. "And I am no prisoner. You may think you've won, but you have only captured a piece of the puzzle." Jason raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her words. "We've won the battle, and you are my prisoner," he said firmly. The alien woman's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. My people will come for me. They will destroy your world for this." Jason could feel a strange thrill building inside him. He had heard the stories of the Zorvaks, how they were fierce and merciless. But there was something different about Nara. She wasn't like the others he had fought. She was smarter, more calculating, and there was an undeniable strength in her that fascinated him. "I don't fear your people," Jason said confidently. "Your people won't be coming for anyone. You're under my command now." Nira scoffed. "You think you can control me?" Jason paused. For a moment, he wasn't sure. Could he control her? Could he tame the fierce warrior standing before him? As the soldiers gathered around, Jason made a decision. "Take her to the holding cells," he ordered. But Nira wasn't done. "You will regret this," she warned, her voice full of danger. "I may be your prisoner now, but I am more than you realize, and when the time comes, you will find that a warrior like me is not easily tamed." Jason watched as his men escorted Nira away. The moment felt strange, almost like he had made a mistake. But he couldn't deny the fascination he felt. There was something about her, her strength, her power, her mystery, that drew him in. As the night fell, Jason stood alone on the battlefield, staring at the stars. The war was not over, and he knew there was still much to be done. But one thing was certain: the victory today had come at a cost. He had captured Nira, but in doing so, he had unwittingly become a part of a much bigger story, one that would change the fate of his world forever. The question was, what would he do next?